Alright, so part 7. Due to the nature of this section of the series, I want to make it clear that while I will try to keep as many things as I can uncensored, some things, including people that have been forgiven and aren't directly important identity wise to situations, will remain censored. However, each of these stories and situations, I will have several key bits of information that I will leave purposely in order to allow people to do their own detective work and find out names should they wish. While I don't want this information public, I don't want it completely hidden, as the point of this is transparency. So if you don't wish to take my word about these situations, you have other people involved that will be able to talk about it. Worst case scenario, if needed, any screenshots that have been live stream recorded by me, we'll have a playlist. We'll have a playlist button at the bottom right. Should you wish to have it authenticated. To prove authenticity, I will DM anyone who needs it a live stream link to me switching in and out of several DMs to prove it was not edited via various methods. With that being said, part 7 is to take you through my experience here since day 1 for Aether. This is to show the situations I've been aware of regarding bans and various close calls, as well as to describe the underlying lessons learned that show a lot about the current state of things. And so this section will wrap up with the stressful elements of running a venue and what I refer to in my discourse announcement as the politics of running a venue and its interactions with the community. So, with that being said, to start off with, I will be summarizing the experience of my first venue briefly, as it is a drastically long story full of details and interactions by default. However, part 7.01 will have all of the details and names named for those that wish to know what happened. So, long story short, when I first got to this community and I was scoping out venues, I found the Forbidden Rose. This was a venue that struck my attention because of how organized things were in terms of the Discord from a business sense and the semi-realism of it, and it was crowded. So I hopped in a voice chat with one of the generous patrons at the time, as well as Mariah, who was one of the owners back then. The important part for right now is that inside of this call, I ended up asking would I be able to get to know the workers and ask questions, etc. about how things work, to which I was answered that I would have to talk to each staff member and see. And so I took this as an open invitation that I'd be able to become friends with and hang out with staff to do the research that I wanted. Because originally I was looking at venues to start my own if it was profitable, but I realized I need to observe and study first. And so I end up making several friends at Forbidden Rose, but in no small part, my ignorance of various things end up causing misunderstandings and concerns from staff. And at two noticeable points, I had said feeling like deep down and talked to someone on staff about it. Cylindria was one example. We're doing a personal truth or dare we had. I asked if she knew anyone at the Rose that had a problem with me or said something negative so that I could fix things if needed. She said that she wasn't aware of any and that management would reach out to me if there was a problem. Arctic, the owner, was the second person I discussed this uneasy feeling with. While I had to be on, While I had seemingly been on friendly terms with most of the staff, I was getting more hearts in my DMs than what I considered to be normal. And while it was making me, that was basically making me uneasy because of my history on my old game. It's like that used to be a sign of dishonesty, and while I raised it as a flag, I slowly shrugged it off. Because this community was new and hadn't done me wrong. In fact, it had actually given me a home. And so I decided to not bring my old game stereotypes and judgments and apply them over here. So, in regards to ignorance, let me preface all of the screenshots that are to come in the future or to that I end up posting inside of 7.01 with the fact that I do not come from a LGBTQ plus background. I do not come from a background of dealing with mental illness, trauma, BDSM relationships, abusive past, nothing of the sort. I come from pure toxicity, where I log in expecting someone to call me a faggot at least 3 times a day and at least 5 messages to kill myself if I'm PvPing and uploading screenshots to the archive that day. And as such, I am much more blunt, confrontational, and generic world sense in terms of how I approach situations. I do not have the same viewpoints and outlook as most people inside of this community. And so this creates a problem whenever I end up dealing with certain behaviors, such as non-confrontational people who may need more understanding and care, people who know various conditions better than what I do, people who feel attachments different and have different priorities. And so while I ended up making friends on staff that were slowly teaching me different things about the community in terms of things that are very specific here that don't apply inside of other games, there were mistakes that I made through ignorance that ended up costing me. And so Forbidden Roles was a home for me for my time there, so much to the point where I had decided to cover every bar buyout, offered giveaways for every opening, and I got to a point I was attempting to hire like 5 to 10ish staff every single week. The entire staff was about to be on payroll because I wanted to financially support every staff member while getting to see a variety of roleplay writing styles and details that each staff member focused on. However, because of the mistakes I made, I was abruptly banned after a voyeur when opening to find out that I had a growing list of complaints over several weeks that climaxed with one event in order to cause my ban. And it was at that point, whenever I ended up getting a DM from Arctic, that a part of me broke inside because the concerns that I had expressed twice had finally came up and everything that I had built up had pretty much crumbled. And so I'll leave out too many personal details, but suffice to say I grew up with an expectation placed on me in order to help others, and this is something that always led me to being deceived, stolen from, and even physically hurt inside of a few situations growing up. And so, in summary, I had always associated helping people with confrontations that unfairly came to me, and Roles was the first time I thought I had peace away from that until my ban. And I couldn't sleep for obvious reasons, and Adal and Jibril ended up staying with me throughout that night while I struggled to make sense of what just happened. And so going through, and I ended up writing what ended up being like an 8-page essay to Mirai, trying to list out anything and every interaction I had at the Forbidden Roles that I thought had even a remote chance to be a reason for my ban. Just going through and apologizing, listing every interaction, how I could fix that situation to make sure it never happened again. Because I had sunk over 50 million into the roles, and this is as a new player, not even 6 months old yet. This is without retainers, this is no patch days, this is just grinding without even having finished MSQ yet, grinded 50 mil to put into the venue. And so to Kochi, who asked me back in part 2 what I would do if I got wronged inside of a ban, that is your answer. I was understanding that my actions could have caused a problem, apologized, and looked for a solution. That was my go-to instead of trying to piss people off. And while I got a mercy exception to a normal full ban from that 8-page essay, those 6,354 words, my ban from the venue and Discord still stayed. And during this time is whenever I get messages from Mirai essentially telling me that I've been lied to, had things hidden from me, and that despite my intentions, despite the fact that I hadn't broken any rules, if there was discomfort from staff, then my ban would have to stay. And it's only at this point, whenever I go back to Arctic's original ban message, that I piece together one or two people that I know were responsible, and I end up feeling betrayed by the people that I ended up helping the most. And so this ends up causing a secondary break where I'm seeing malicious actions inside of my head, and this ends up taking shape inside of my behavior at Carrie's wedding that happened shortly after my ban. So she was a courtesan for Forbidden Roles. That was one of the people shocked at my ban because she never had any issues. And so we stayed on good terms even afterwards, to the point she invited me to her wedding. There's the open world bit that ends up happening where you have roleplay skits being done, and then her and Junie are supposed to head somewhere and then come to the Rose. So everyone invited ends up leaving from open world, and we all end up going to the Rose Yard. Now, this is fresh after my ban, and while I have like 2 hunches, I don't have any names or anything like that. I don't have anything confirmed, and I don't know the other people. And so at this point, everyone that's standing around me inside of the yard is essentially an op, or whatever. They are not somebody that I can trust. They are not somebody that I necessarily want to be friendly around, because I am feeling betrayed at this point. And so my trust, my will to communicate with everyone is gone. And like, essentially, I'm just standing inside of the yard, away from anyone else, not targeting anyone, not talking to anyone, and this is not a venue opening or whatever. Let me make this clear. And I end up getting a message from Helge relaying that I've been banned from the venue and that management is asking me to leave the property. And so this is the secondary this is where the secondary break that I referred to from Ryan ends up happening. The first break is me feeling sad and betrayed. The second one is me feeling excessively wronged, and so I start putting my foot down on certain things. And so I respond back saying that I'm just here for the wedding, that I'm not talking to anybody, that I'm not going to do anything as retaliation, right? So or whatever. And this is from the foundation that inside of my head, if I don't plan on talking to, if I don't plan on harassing any of the staff, me just being in the yard is not a problem. And so Hell J ends up repeating this statement a few times, and I end up saying, look, I understand your concerns, but I'm not here to cause a problem. I'm just here to support a friend at their wedding. And I say, you can go ahead and you can relay that to management, but you did your job already letting me know what their wishes are. And while this ends up and while she ends up thanking me for saying that I'm not going to cause a problem, she ends up warning me that things are likely to escalate still. And so this is whenever I end up getting a message on Discord from Mariah threatening me with a friend who's a GM. And I'm like, yes, please do go get a GM and tell them I'm in tells with your management, saying that I'm here to support a friend and that I've said multiple times that I'm not here to cause a problem. And so we end up going back and forth because, like I said earlier, it's like that I was like, oh, it's just like the nice and kind part of me basically broke the day of my ban, and I was putting my foot down on certain shit, saying that I had essentially disagreed with their decision making, and that I wasn't going to let their opinion be the sole deciding factor of my actions. That if I saw a reason for going through and being there inside of that yard, which was in this case in order to support a friend's wedding, that I would end up doing so. And so for the people going through and watching the series up to this point, you'll realize that this sounds a lot like the troll groups, and it is very similar. And that's why part 7.02 exists, where I'm going to directly mention why, despite a similar past to what they've experienced, they still personally piss me off, and I consider us on two different levels and motivations. But me and Mariah get into that argument in Discord and leave shit at difference of opinion, because I end up saying that if someone has destructive / hurtful behaviors toward themselves, if you'd actually care, you'd force the situation and not let them do it. Like, this is a little bit of a drastic example, but say for example, if you have a prisoner inside of jail that's on suicide watch, you remove anything that they can use, straitjacket might come in, etc. If someone is not in a mental state in order to make healthy decisions for themselves, someone else is supposed to step up if possible. But Carrie ends up showing up at the yard, and I go through and I pull up, give her a hug of support, and say that she ends up saying that she was happy that I was there. Everyone went inside of the rows afterward, and so I end up sending her a tell asking if she wanted me to come inside, and she said that she would, but that I know that it isn't her call. And so I end up zipping and end up teleporting away. Years later, I'm relaying this story to Kimura, and she ends up vaguely remembering Mariah mentioning something about someone causing problems at a wedding way back in some venue owner only Discord that used to exist. So if any OG Aether venue owners that were in it remember that, yes, this is what actually happened. With that being said, moving forward, because I got banned for something that wasn't in the rules, I started to join every Discord, small and big. Probably had over 40 Discords inside of my tab where I was looking over the rules of each of them, because I said that if I got banned at a venue for something that wasn't on the rules, somebody has to have it somewhere. And this is where I'm starting to break things. This is where I'm going to start breaking things up for structure reasons. As I've already mentioned and summarized my first experience, which is being banned without warning and being banned without breaking the rules. And this is something that I'm just going to put on screen, and I want to make it clear. I do not have at the moment any stories from these venues regarding abuse of the rule that I'm showing. I'm just showing these as an example, because this type of language, this type of behavior actually exists at every single venue for the most part, even if they don't explicitly state this. And so this is the section that is written formally, but informally, this is the statement saying that without warning and without breaking the rules is okay. And you don't necessarily think of it that way. Most cases you read this and think of someone as trying to be slick and really close to breaking the rules but not quite, or they end up doing something crazy and outlandish but it isn't inside the rules yet. This is meant to cover it. This is not something that you expect to get, I guess you could say, abused. You don't expect it to lead to situations like I'm going to show later, where it leads to punishment against people who didn't even have the intent to harm someone. And this is where it becomes a problem, because you end up mentioning situations of malicious persuasion, like inside of my rules. You mentioned gaslighting, bullying, harassment, right? These are all things that you expect to be attached to to intention. And you say, okay, that sounds about right, I'm with you. Now, what if I said people can hit these areas and not be aware of it? What if I said that in very short interactions, someone's intention can be up to interpretation? And you say, okay, how does that work? Well, one example will end up being gaslighting. This is going through and creating a false narrative and manipulating someone else into believing it, often making them question their reality, their thinking, their senses, etc. However, there's an important part in that definition, and it's that it is false. A true narrative is not considered gaslighting. And so if you have a cropped situation, like say one or two screenshots, and someone says, this person gaslighted me, how do you determine whose narrative is actually false or true in a relationship that is likely months long with mistakes and hurt feelings on both sides, and all you have is an excerpt for one or two conversations? You're looking at what is probably less than 5% of the relationship, but you're being asked to make a judgment call on whether this person is guilty or not, whether for a ban or worthy of being added into a watch list. And so I'm going to give an actual example of this later, but the main point is that these are categories where intention should be the deciding factor, and yet most of these decisions are being made in cases where intention is not even valued or even properly able to be assessed. And even in those situations, if a venue owner feels pressured by staff or guests, that one exception saying they can ban without breaking the rules or without warning, that exception gets used. And I've seen that happen repeatedly since I first came here. And that is one of the underlying issues in the majority of this, is that the people, most venue owners, don't have an issue making that subjective call with limited information. And some will just do the next best thing, like what happened at Nest, where you have a rule added to the list after an incident happened. And this is an old rule. It's been whatever, they've had it restructured, but this used to be one of the old rules. So anybody that's been inside of the Nest Discord for a long time, you'll be able to vouch for me on that. So if you ever wondered why some venues have significantly more rules than others, experiences are often a cause of that. Something will happen, it will be dealt with, and the rule gets added afterward. Most times being that a punishment was given despite not being inside of the rules originally. And that is the reason why this excerpt in my rules exists at the very bottom. And this is going to be a repeated pattern that you're going to see as I go through everything, how this community shaped the rules that I have and the interview questions that I ask, because it's all from things that I saw during the year that I was prepping my opening. But we're going to keep things nice and organized. So first and foremost, going to throw this in the top left as a constant reminder of what we've discussed regarding bans already. And I'm going to toss the message at the bottom relaying what we are currently talking about. So make sure you have some time put away, because this is going to be a long story time. We're just getting started, and it's only going to get worse as you see certain things that happened in my first venue progress and repeat inside of other venues. So, having already seen a ban without warning and without breaking the rules, the next category is bans without screenshots. So, this is whenever the OG Black Rose, aka Lilting Lilium, comes in. They have a rule update like the same day or the next day of whenever I get banned, and the manager is writing in the rules something like, I shouldn't have to say this, but ask for express permission to talk to our staffs and vendors OOC about OOC topics. And I'm hit tilting hard as fuck IRL, because it's not immediately obvious why OOC topics are off limits when they get discussed in PvE content, when they get discussed in other games, etc. It's like even IRL, if you go to a business, to any store, talking about things other than that particular business isn't banned. And so I'm irritated, like, how is this something obvious that I'm supposed to immediately know that this community is different than IRL and even other games and even other communities inside of the same game, that this isn't acceptable here. But this goes back to the idea of slowly learning things, where people like Adal and Kerr and I have not really sunk into my head at this time just how many people have had trauma or abusive past, how many stalker stories end up existing inside of the community, to the point to where what I'm considering to be regular behavior is restricted here inside of some cases. And so, funny story, I walk into Black Rose back then, look around for like 5 minutes, don't talk to anyone, don't hire anyone, don't talk in the Discord, nothing. And a few days later, after the first time I show up for like 5 minutes, I get removed from the Discord. And I end up finding out that Cylindria shared screenshots of our situation at Rose that probably got me banned at Black Rose, the OG Black Rose, aka now Lilting Lilium. And so I message management asking what's up with the ban, and I get this back. A little screenshot saying that I made no less than 6 people traumatized or uncomfortable. And see, what's funny about that is that despite being traumatized and uncomfortable, I was hiring like 6 to 10 staff members every single week for voyeurs and talking to them on Discord. And so in my head, I got 6+ people traumatized or uncomfortable for weeks, but still talking to me, still putting hearts inside of my DMs, still taking my money from sessions, and they said shit to me. And then I go to the first line saying consent is an option to be ignored. Like, you over here trying to paint me as like a rapist, and I got a DM from management saying I didn't break any rules for the venue, and consent is in the damn rules. So now I'm in a position where I'm like, what the fuck? I got somebody in the background DMing who knows how many people, calling me a rapist and traumatizer, and I'm like, do they not realize nobody talked to me? Do they not realize I broke down and wrote an 8-page apology? Do they not realize that I was friends with these people, trying to help them every single fucking week? And then I asked if there was a problem twice and didn't get feedback. And this is something that I know now as a venue owner, but I didn't know back then. But if I broke a courtesan's consent, my ass would have been banned on the spot, but I wasn't. Hashtag it wasn't a wham bam done decision, it was deliberated on. And so I look back, realizing that that consent comment had to be something else. And as time goes on, two things end up happening. One, Marilyn ends up having someone with a similar character model that is posted inside of a Not Safe for Work Discord, and her DMs get lit up with people asking if she's not safe for work now. And it ends up annoying the hell out of her because they didn't tag the picture. And now she's being blown up because people think that it's her. And then two, I end up having a staff member that randomly comes to me one day saying that I need to drop/fire her in order to avoid problems. And I'm like, the fuck, where did this come from? And so I end up finally catching them in game and trying to figure out what the fuck happened. Come to find out, she took someone's character model as a baseline to start off with for her Vieira face that she wanted to make. Hadn't even used it maliciously yet, as far as I was told. And this girl is over here crying as if she got raped. And so now they want to drop staff on my venue and another venue of a friend of theirs they have in order to not cause problems for us. And that's when shit starts to click from back then. Because I had an argument with Jibril in DMs over photography. Because my ex for 4 to 5 years was playing this game and originally hated me getting into ERP. And it wasn't until I explained the level of detail you get into at the higher levels where you can start to see like why and how people enjoy different kinks. And this is I guess you could say a profiling/psychology learning tool for me. I like learning things in general, why people think certain things, why people feel certain things. And so she ends up giving it a chance herself, and she ends up making a new character over on Aether to try this shit out with me. So this is a level 1 character that I ended up helping to create. I'm going to have the screenshots up on the screen or whatever, the PlayStation messages. And so I end up bringing her to Forbidden Rose, set up several voyeurs in order for her to see how this shit works, learn how to, learn the basics of roleplay, take her to openings in order to enjoy herself. We're inside a voice chat, reading roleplay inside of the Discord together, etc. Because like, even though she was my ex, we're still on good terms. It's just that we need to iron out like 1 or 2 issues before we start being serious again because of shit that happened like years ago. And so at this point, I end up writing her a small roleplay on WhatsApp that she really likes. And this is during the time period that I've been shown custom poses. And so I reach out to Jib to see if they can grab the model and set up a surprise photo for my ex in order to match the roleplay we had on WhatsApp. Not even a not safe for work pose, just some Valentine's Day type basic romantic shit. And so they turn around and ask if I have permission from them in order to use the model. And I'm like, no, ... That kind of defeats the purpose of it being a surprise. And so after they say that I need permission despite the relationship I have with this person, I'm like, fine, I don't agree with that rule, but I'll abide by it. Cancel the pic, don't care. Because we end up getting into a long argument about the legal technicalities and like easy bypasses that exist. And I'm coming from a background where nobody has a connection to their character. If someone clones you, you call them a fanboy and keep it moving. It's not worth more than 3 seconds of your time, let alone crying over it. Someone takes your character and photoshops over it to mock you on YouTube, who cares? You can't legally do anything, so why get flustered over something you can't control? And it's like, even to this day, I still don't think that it's technically healthy for people to have like as much of a connection to their character as what they seem to have, but that's just the difference of opinion, right? And that mostly comes down to like, especially since like, as unique as my hero is that most people talk about, even I ended up meeting a clone of me that was over on Balmung and had my sub double taken like, what the fuck? Because this is an in-game character that's looking like me. This isn't even an alt that's just freshly made. And so I think back and I'm like, consent is an option to be ignored. Like, you really trying to tell me that I was thinking for months that I had people calling me a rapist in DMs over a fucking level 1 character that I helped make, that I glammed up, that was made to be with me from someone I was in a relationship with for 4+ years and was on good terms with, and I canceled the damn photo. But that's worthy of some shit. That sounds like rape. Me trying to make a G-pose version of Surprise Roses for my ex on a character that she made to be with me. So, yeah. Skipping back into my ignorant state, I've lost 50 plus mil. I've been lied to / had things hid from me. And now I got people calling me a rapist inside of DMs. That's hella great. And this is whenever I start to get a paranoia because of the Black Rose ban. Because I'm looking around and seeing several different members of Forbidden Rose join the same new discords as me. Because a lot of new venues are popping up during this time. And I'm like, please tell me that they're not following me in order to get me banned everywhere else over some shit I don't even know. Like, what the fuck did I do to deserve being followed? Because Mariah told me that I could go to other establishments and enjoy them with my friends, but it's not looking like it because I got pre-banned at Black Rose, and I've had Hannah tell me I'm on watch lists and ban lists elsewhere. And so I'm starting to view that line from Mariah as another lie, and I'm seemingly grateful to have a doll as a shield in order to let me stay as sugar and spice without fucking hassle. And so at this point, I'm quiet as fuck, not talking in any discords, not hiring any courts because my trust has been tanked to shit. And I stay in this state for like 1 to 1.5 months until Lubimi ends up dragging me out. But during this time period, something else ends up happening. A subscriber of mine almost gets banned at Black Rose as well. And so we're talking in general about venues, and I'm relaying what happened to me at Forbidden Rose, and he ends up sharing his story at Black Rose. And so him and a friend go to Black Rose, and they're chilling. And I'm leaving a text of others showing because there's some familiar names and an important shout for anyone that wants to know when this happened. And so a girl comes up, apparently winking and smiling, and he responds back. She's trying to see what's up because she notices his friend, and he ends up bringing up that he's making connections for not safe for work photography. And this is something that grabs her attention and interest, and the only thing holding her back is just that she's new to it and doesn't know what to do. To which my friend ends up saying that he got her, he can walk her through shit, right? And so he asks if she has a Discord. Can't remember on the call if she added him or not, but she ends up walking off. And a few minutes later, management comes by, telling him that he needs to leave, that they don't appreciate or tolerate people trying to force themselves sexually onto others. And he's lost his fuck at this point. And so he ends up getting cold shoulder for a second until he mentions that he can provide screenshots. And so he goes on Discord with management, gives them the convo up to where they end up speaking, and he gets off the hook. Management ends up saying that it wasn't as catcall us as they were made to believe, with him not trying to with him not trying to force himself on some shy girl that was there alone. And so he mentions in this DM in terms of like most people losing in that situation and not being able to defend themselves, because he's telling me that this has happened to several friends of his and is the reason they don't go to venues. And so he's pissed afterward. And I end up telling him how to get in contact with said person that lied on him, and a bit later they end up meeting. And this person admits to deceiving management, saying that they needed to come clean about what they used to do if they wanted to have good relationships moving forward. And my guy is still pissed off, so he lets loose a little bit in her DMs before they go to Wolf's Den and she gets her ass beat. But I was a friend of mine that had like 400 to 600 million from selling a large inside of Shiro and Play Money, and he left over that incident. Like 1 or 2 months later, he's like over on Balmont because venues aren't worth the trouble, where he's saying he's not having any issues over there. And do you want to know what else ends up happening during this time period? I found out what Mariah meant by this line, saying that courts have their kink list, but that represents the character and not the person underneath. And this is something that's not going to make sense initially, but sometimes there can be up to like 4 kink lists that someone uses. I've heard of a kink list for new clients, a kink list for returning clients, a kink list for relationship partners, and the out of character kink list. And so as far as I've heard, there's generally isn't an accepted practice, but this allows for sometimes where an in-character kink list can have a green/blue kink even, but the out-of-character kink list has it as red. And so the character is hireable for this kink, but the person themselves is uncomfortable doing this. And I end up finding out at a Pluradice event that Nine, the main courtesan I was with at Forbidden Rose, falls into this. Because I started off as a male aura, and remember blue/green for things, what's the name of it? And remember blue/green things for anything that involved the dick. And then I look up and I see reds over her shit not too long after I'm banned. And I'm like, what the fuck did I do to cause this? And then I find out that she's been this way the entire time. She's been red on that, but she put up with it because a chunk of her clients were male. And so I hear she's been complaining in staff chat about that. And so I'm like, I guess that line that I said to Mariah is finally kicking in, and some honesty and self-help is starting to be visible. But this is something that still ends up irritating me, because I realized then that what I consider to be the climax/worst offense for my ban with traumatization wouldn't have even happened if she had been honest on that kink list from the start. because there was a section of my band message that talked about implying someone else would do a kink and a bit of trauma subjects not being dropped. And while that situation is twisted out of context, which will be inside of part 7.01, long story short, that conversation was only being had because I was hiring Nye 2 to 3 times a week already. And that was going to change because I wanted to hire Hannah. And Nye ended up saying that Hannah is meh and not good for long term, to which I respond that I need someone that can go into extremes and dark categories long term, because I do dip my foot into that. And that is how the trauma subject even came up to begin with. But that entire conversation is based on the fact that I was having personal sessions with Nye. If she had males as a red king from day one, we would have never had non-voyeur sessions, and that conversation would have never happened. And what ends up making this worse is the timeline of everything. So the discussion regarding Hannah and what ends up being the trauma conversation ends up happening, but then afterward I end up booking a voyeur session between her and another worker, and then during that voyeur session is whenever we start the discussion of me helping her learn how to dom male characters. And so this is, if you look at the right, you'll literally see me scroll all the way down and you can see the dates and the yesterday and whatnot, because I'm taking this live the next day. This is an old screenshot that I took the next day, because the next day after we are literally talking about how or whatever, like setting up the practice in order for her to learn how to dom males, is the day that I end up catching a ban. So this is a person that complained about that conversation and then went and let me book them, went to go through into practice, and then went through and scheduled a practice session with me, and then the ban kicked in. So, and people wonder why I don't trust staff, and it's because these are things that happened to me since day one. I've had dishonesty. But back at the OG Black Rose, that was a situation that happened with a friend and a random person that he didn't even know. Do you want to know where else I end up seeing this? At an opening at Memories Inn, where one of my regulars ends up getting flirted with by 2 people to find out that they're actually unofficially courting. And whenever he makes a sarcastic line looking for them to disagree on being called boring whores, they take that comment as him actually calling them whores. Instead of switching the adjective and noun to another description, they immediately dip, and one of them ends up sending a message to one of my staff saying that someone was mean and calling them a whore. And this is whenever I get irritated, because like, you just talked to him and flirted for a good bit, and then as soon as he makes a sarcastic remark, he's a villain now instead of the person actually breaking the rules. And so like, while I'm heated inside of this situation, this actually ends up going to my staff chat because this person came back and apologized. And so I let my staff decide if they wanted to show mercy, as it was them that was affected by said person's actions. And so this ends up being an example of where, yes, there are people in the community that will twist things or flat out lie, but it is the venue owner that gets to dictate if that action, of that behavior, ends up having a negative effect on somebody else. And the only reason I'm bringing this up, right, is because of this line from Yoka from Under the Moonlight, where they end up saying that all it takes is 2 corroborating stories to count as proof. And this situation that just happened with me has 2 courtesans who were working together, and this is something that isn't even known until they reveal it. And so all it takes is just them not saying that they're friends, and now I have 2 guests that can make a complaint saying that someone insulted them and called them a whore, and now I have a problem if my guy doesn't have the screenshots to defend himself. And this is something that is especially a problem for anyone who's been in the community for 6 or more months, because you probably have at least 2 people that don't like you. Hell, most courts I know have 1 or 2 other courts on the same staff that don't even like them. And so this 2-person rule inside of my head is asking to be abused, because that's not a hard threshold to hit. But want to know someone else who can get hit up by the same type of banning? Mistress Freya from Sinners, another venue owner that always trusts the victim, always trusts her staff, even without proof. And what makes it fucked up is that, just like my first ban, 75% of these venue owners don't even give you a screenshot or a name to defend yourself against when you do get banned. You just get the charge the majority of the time, and you have to backtrack and figure out shit on your own. But proof of that is going to be later on in this series inside of an extreme case I had to handle recently. But that wraps up bans without screenshots primarily, so let's move on to bans just for how you think. So these next 2 stories are going to involve the same person who was lied on / false banned twice. And this is partially as a response to Yoka as well for this specific line, because as far as I know, I've been lied on at least 5 times between Forbidden Roads, Madame Marina, Alley Cat twice, and said earlier pedophile accusations from the people who hate the roleplay community. Marina's and Alley Cat's accusations will be addressed inside of part 8. Maura has been lied on so much to where she has an archive that she's about to drop in a bit of all the people that lied on her that she kept screenshots on. And the people I'm about to mention, the person I'm about to mention, has been lied on twice and ran out of the community. And Kyojin's story later on has him being lied on twice as well, with a similar effect. As an antisocial person, I should not have 4 people that I know that have been falsely accused multiple times, including 5+ times myself, as this is actually rare inside of the community. But to get into this first story, this happens roughly a little bit after the Forbidden Rose closes, where a former staff member of said venue decides to make their own. And this is an exclusive venue, not a public one, if that also helps anyone remember. And so this venue has invited me, and also has another person who used to be known in the community, who used to get around a bit just like Buffalo Brent, but he was a comedian as a personality type. And so I will call him our comedian friend as an anonymous title, as that is what most people know as his defining trait, to make people laugh and tell jokes. And so he's a generous patron at this venue, doing the crafting of drinks, etc., for openings and whatnot. And suddenly one day I see this in the announcements, a message calling him out by name, saying that he's been banned for inappropriate comments and making staff uncomfortable. And this is a person who I had always known to be friendly, telling jokes like I mentioned beforehand, and I'm wondering what's up. And so I reach out to the owner, who was a friend back then, to figure out what was up. She ends up saying that his jokes don't always go the way they intend, and I'm still following at this point because comedy is very subjective for obvious reasons. But then she says that they joked about looting the wife, and I knew that was going to be a rip at that point. However, I end up getting into a call with this person, and we exchange screenshots of their conversation with management, and I show what I was told on my end. Come to find out, they had been in a conversation about physical traits that sparked their attraction with the owner. And said owner mentioned a bunch of traits to their IRL wife, at which point a joke came to mind. However, he notes that this would end up being inappropriate since he doesn't know them, and this is something that strikes me as off, because the owner told me that the joke was made, not that it was just thought of. And I'm thinking in my head that others having sexual attraction to your partner is something that's hit or miss on the person, and so while most times it's off limits, it's not always off limits, especially if you're close to said person. And so come to find out, because of a wording mistake, he ended up hitting a trigger, because the original word he used was looting, which wasn't accurate, because the owner comes back later on after thinking about it and is mad that he even thought of looting their wife, and this is when he comes back to try and correct said mistake and is shut down. What he actually had in mind was a Dragon Ball Z parody that I'm going to put up on screen briefly.
At first you had my curiosity, but now you have my erection.
And so that ends up alluding technically to having sexual interest in someone, as opposed to describing actions. And at least to me, those are 2 different magnitudes of responses that a person should have. That someone telling you what they do to your partner would be a higher response than just stating that they're hot, sexy, whatever term you'd want to use. And so I'm looking back at the context of the conversation, where they were mentioning things that they were attracted to and how their wife's specific traits took things to the next level. And this is whenever I realized why the DBZ parody even came to mind, where he's agreeing with said escalation. And so while it came to mind, he realized due to previous warnings of toning down jokes and the context of not knowing the wife personally, that said joke could be inappropriate, and decided not to say it. But apparently just having the joke even come to mind, even as a comedic personality that always tells jokes, even understanding in context it may come off wrong, is ban worthy. And so I look back at this ban message where it says uncomfortable, and I'm seeing another subjective case where it wouldn't be a problem for everyone, and then inappropriate comments, and I'm thinking this guy just got banned over a meme that was related to the conversation, but it's classified as inappropriate despite him not even saying it. And so I end up scooting out of the server, because I don't even want to be in a place where I can get banned over something as small as a misunderstanding over a meme, where the way that I default think in and of itself, regardless of if I correct it with my actions, is still ban worthy. And this is something that I've even heard of a recent example of. So word ended up getting to me that apparently Champagne Ruin ended up kicking staff and FC members for showing support to Kimura's Lalafell message, essentially saying that she wanted to give freedom for Lalafell to roleplay as adults like in the lore/default game, to let everyone decide how they treat Lalafell themselves instead of pigeonholing everyone into the same opinion. But I digress, that's for another section. So our comedian friend ends up having this happen, and later on they're at a venue called Wanderlust. This is during the same time that Madame Marina has closed Sugar and Spice and is doing management work for Under the Moonlight and others, including Wonderlust. So our comedian friend ends up meeting a staff member there, and they end up having a session between the two of them that is outside of the venue. However, this session ends up having to use a safe word due to a bad history that exists with the staff member. And when the safe word gets used, she apologized for having done so. And what does our comedian friend do? He shows understanding, takes the blame partially off of her, and immediately undoes the restraints and goes to comfort her. Now, a little bit later, Marina is in my Discord giving me advice for Memories In, because I've already started making the Discord and we're in voice chat with a doll and others. And she ends up telling us a story of a situation that happened at Wonderlust where seemingly barriers were set up, ignored, and the worker went along with it and came to her crying inside a voice chat afterward. And so this is a situation that she responds to by trying to ban said person that caused it but got removed from her position. And so she's telling me and a doll to avoid that venue. And a little later, whenever I go to invite our comedian friend to the Discord, he ends up asking if Marina is there. And I say, yeah. And then he ends up saying, no thanks. That apparently Marina has been on a warpath accusing him of rape. And I immediately realizes this, and I end up saying, like, wait, hold on. Like, you have to be the person that she has to just, like, finish talking to us about whenever she said X and X happened. And then he links me to chat log to the situation that I showed previously and tells me that he was the reason that Marina got removed, because she went over the people above her head in order to try to ban him and went against what happened inside of the chat log. Come to find out, he was still in touch with said staff member, and even she was saying that the situation was blown out of proportion. And so Marina has taken this incident and started to slander this venue for being objective, saying that they care more about keeping a staff than care more about keeping a client than staff well-being, and going around calling him a rapist. That she has successfully bullied him out of the not safe for work community, that now he has a similar situation to my story where I ended up quitting the roleplay community for that month, and most likely permanently if it wasn't for Ubimi. And want to know where our comedian friend is now? Not going to venues like that anymore, running a safe for work tavern. Started his own venue just like I did. And so you say, wait, you've had courts that have been uncomfortable and didn't say so. You've had courts that lied on their kink list. You've seen guests flat out lie or twist a situation on a person they don't even know. You've seen people banned over just how they think and not how they act. And now you have a situation where you had a court who used the safe word, had it respected, and the person still got in trouble just for making a staff member uncomfortable without intention. And it's like, yep. And that ban would have stayed in place if it had been Sugar and Spice, where Marina had final say so instead of Wonderlust. And so you ask, well, how do I avoid bans? Because some of this sounds unfair. And the answer is that you pray you don't run into a random mind in the community. Because keep in mind, you need the person initiating the act to do something, but also the venue owner to handle it a certain way. Not every court lies on their kink list. Not every court has a bad history with certain kinks. Not every guest is looking to defraud someone. But they do exist, and when those situations do happen, the majority of the time, you're probably looking at a venue owner with a protect the victim mentality, because it's the majority of them on Aether, and you're fucked afterward. Because if you don't have a log, you're definitely screwed. And even if you do have a log, you can still be seen as a problem and get hit with making someone uncomfortable. And as time goes on, I keep seeing this get worse and worse, with slander and rumors basically running rampant inside of venues, which is why I ended up mentioning inside of my announcement that I've seen more reason to leave this community as the months go by. Because damn near every month I end up hearing another story of someone being done wrong. And so that leads me to the last big story I have of Kiljan, which is a name that some people may have heard of. And so with Kiljan, things are a bit worse, because now you have a collaboration between venue owners in order to slander someone falsely. Similar to our comedian friend with Marina, but this time with 3 to 4 venue owners. So this actually takes place in the anti-troll Discord. Remember in part 2 where I mentioned where venue owners would talk about community things, warnings, etc. So one day Rune makes a post in the Discord saying Kiljan is back to his old shit. And that's a name that I remembered because I saw it on Full Moon's Wall of Shame or whatever way back whenever they first opened-ish. And this was a person that I had asked Honey Banu, aka Kitty Mew Mew, about, and they told me that they used to have problems, but that things were fixed and that they had just been chilling, that they were like a watcher for them, so to speak. And so I'm like, okay, the fuck happened now that he's back on his old shit? And so I'm reading, and Rune is talking about how uncomfortable / creepy his behavior is, etc. And I'm going to have bits of this censored out because it's not safe for work, and I know safe for work people are watching, and for privacy reasons on both ends, but I'm leaving enough in order for you to get the gist of the message. It's an OC not safe for work message from him. And the green bits on the picture are censors that are done in the original image. My edits being in red as previously done in the series. And so I see this post, and the first thing that stands out to me is that the date is censored. And I'm like, how the fuck is the date censored? This is supposed to be him coming back and doing something that several venue owners in the Discord said he hadn't done in months, but the proof is that this is a recent incident would be the date, which is hidden. And so I'm like, that's interesting. And then I also realize there's no messages from the quote-unquote victim. So I have no context for this screenshot. So no date to verify that it's new, and I have no context. And so I'm like, okay, this ain't enough for me. Let me ask for more. Because this is a Discord message, which means that they have access to before and after, but didn't send it. And this is when the situation turns into some bullshit, right? Because me and Rune have a little back and forth again, but this starts off with me low-key getting a red flag whenever Rune ends up saying no consent for that screenshot to be shared around, and that there's a handful of people who came forth about this, but that's all we received. And so I asked if she got the entire conversation and how that screenshot actually came up, or if she was just sent that snip. Rune says that she was only sent the snip, and that this is a person who is not a courtesan, does not ERP, and has no interest in anything like that. And there's not a reason to play devil's advocate. And so I go back and respond saying that I've been first-hand witness to clipped conversations, people lying about not safe for work interactions that they have. And I make it clear that obviously things happen, but to have a balanced judgment, I want to see the entire context. I want to see that this situation was forced, was coerced, as she put it inside of the starting message, and that I don't want to make a judgment just from a snippet. And then she says this is that this is a person that is a reputable member of the Aether community, that the numbers and history alone should be enough to prove that this guy is bad news. And see, that's funny as shit, because this is the start of where Rune abandons her own rules of her venue, because she flat out says in Fight Club's rules that they won't go off of he said, she said. And yet here she is saying that there's enough numbers that it's okay to go off of hearsay. And then I get hit by Freya trying to question me for getting more receipts, and then Rune says that there are receipts, but only got consent in order to share one. And I'm like, that's interesting. And so I have someone that trusted you enough to give you a receipt, but not to give context. And this is something that I point out that I'm not leaning either way, but if someone is hesitant to give context, normally that means that they're trying to hide something that incriminates them. And then Yukiko comes up as another victim, and she ends up saying that he did X and X action in game, and yet has no screenshots of the conversation. So we have a venue owner that's in a Discord for receipts against harassment that didn't take receipts. Okay, that's another red flag. And then Rune is over here giving even more reasons to accept hearsay, to accept he said, she said. And then I get put as a victim blamer for pointing out how we have so many victims either in-game or on Discord, including a venue owner, but all we have is one censored screenshot. We ain't even got a GM ticket. And so I get kicked, and thankfully I've already saved the screenshot of Kyojin's message, and so I end up going to Kyojin, and this guy is scarred to shit. His first couple of responses, I can already tell he's been bullied and has had a mental breakdown like I did in the past. And he's thinking I'm just there to go through and say I'm banning him, and I'm like, nah, I'm actually here to talk and figure out what the fuck is up. Because I talked to one of my staff who used to have him as a client, and they said he was asking for permission for OC shit when they knew him. And this matches what Honey Bunu told me way back, and also matches the idea that he went several months without problems. And so I'm here thinking like, okay, why the fuck would somebody have the solution to the problem they had, post positive messages in a bunch of Discords, create a venue and throw the spotlight and attention on themselves just to fuck it up and revert back to their old habits? That shit does not make any sense on the surface. And so talking to Kyojin, I find this man has been harassed for like 3 months. Him, his venue, his FC, including the kid, got harassed for like 3 months over this shit, right? And everyone's talking shit and making accusations against him, talking about they have screenshots, but ain't nobody saying shit to him. And I'm having flashbacks to Rune saying that there's not consent to share that screenshot. And so I go through and send him the screenshot, and he immediately recognizes that he did write it. And so I'm like, cool, now we just need to go to where that conversation is in order to get context. Because if he's saying he's innocent and they're bringing up, oh shit, that conversation has to be him getting set up. And this is something he cannot remember originally, but after like 3-4 hours or so, I end up getting a breakthrough and notice that the profile picture is different than what he currently has. And when he sees it, he realizes that he had that profile picture for like a 2-week window. And so he remembers being at Fight Club during that time, and then remembers that it's with a person named Celia Star, who is, importantly, not a person he's with anymore, hence the profile picture he's updated. a person who is a VIP at Fight Club from Rune, and used to be a venue owner of Night's Roses, 400 plus Discord size. And so he pulls up the DMs and starts rapid firing them to me, and I start reading. Tell me why I'm sitting here looking at this shit, right? And she's teasing this man repeatedly. Smiley faces and shit. And these are in between the OLC posts that Rune says are so disgusting and gross. And then Killjin tells me that she was sending nudes. And then I look at one of the posts and I see a message from him referencing her with other people. And I'm like, a picture with her and other people that's not safe for work. Okay, that's interesting. And then I look up, and in another screenshot, I see a deleted post from Celia that he's responding to that he's also appreciative of. And on the same day as this disgusting screenshot, supposedly, he wants to give her a gift and offers an outfit, but she says she mostly does mounts and minions, but this is after he is supposed to recover her from the guild that she's lost gambling at Fight Club, because she's near broke again. So this man is supposed to be under blackmail and coercion charges, and we got the victim over here adding shit happily that they're supposed to be receiving as compensation. I'll never take you for granted sounds like blackmail and coercion. Please, I want to spoil you sounds like blackmail and coercion. LOL deal from the victim sounds like blackmail and coercion. And so a week later, she's still messaging him and sending hearts and shit. And I'm pissed as fuck at this point. She looking real uncomfortable in them pictures. She looking like a victim right now. But a crop out was a receiver room to crop only his message out of that entire interaction. And so Celia ass is hit for cropping shit to set him up. And then Rune took that shit, and then she gets hit on 3 categories. 1, for getting no damn context to the situation. 2, for saying this bitch ain't do not safe for work when I checked Fight Club's Discord and she got a roleplay role. She's a not safe for work venue owner and has a not safe for work role in her own Discord still. And 3, for highly likely collaborating with this bitch in order to get money out of Killjin to gamble at her venue. The only receipt you have just happens to be someone abusing Killjin for your benefit. And now that the shit is confirmed to be sus, I go back and throw in Yukiko's name. Her ass had a situation from right back then. Her shit ain't even recent. And so I'm sitting here looking back at this message, right? And he's confused as shit on April 8th when he starts hearing accusations. And then I look up on the 10th and it's a decent length apology saying everything he did wrong that got twisted out of his intention. And then I go back to Yukiko's post, right? And she says a few things that are now in question. Because she says he name dropped owning sinners. But inside of his DM with her, he ends up correcting and saying that he misspoke, that he was talking about his venue and wasn't trying to score ERP using his status. And then you say that he tried to sponsor your venue, and he's in DMs to you saying that you came to him asking to be partners. So I'm like, wait, how the fuck are you going to say yeah and no inside of the anti-troll Discord if you were the one that came forward to ask? Because that's a stupid ass detail to lie on in an apology message randomly, because there's no benefit, especially since you'd call him out on it, on that detail immediately, and it ruined the apologizing tone of the message. Even if they lied about everything else, the intentions with the courtesan, the misspeaking, even if they lied about all that to downplay the situation, there is no benefit, there is no mercy, sympathy changing from sponsoring your venue to you coming to them asking to be partners. And so that shit looks like your ass lied as well inside of the Discord, because you actually have a motive to lie and he doesn't. Because placing him as the person who approached you to sponsor places him as someone who could abuse power. Want to know what else is funny? That you claim you don't ERP, and yet your staff at a roleplay venue with a bio that says you do not safe for work, but you're shy about it. And don't even think about editing it because I've already got a live stream recording. But if you say you do not safe for work, but you don't ERP like a courtesan in written form, I would assume that means not safe for work OLC, which is what happened with Celia. And what's funny about that is that I heard of a few situations where people got mad at others for potential relationships lost, and then he tells me that he never tried to ERP with you, that you got friend zoned. And then he sends me your DMs from 225 up to 410, no not safe for work messages, and you haven't blocked him yet. So if these not safe for work approaches are before that starting date that made you uncomfortable, you didn't block him after 1.5 months and responding to him near the end still. And then I remember how I couldn't get any receipts from you, and so I'm thinking, let's just play with the idea that he didn't try to ERP or do not safe for work OLC with you. And then I start thinking, someone who's shy according to their bio, that approached him to be partners, and I see shit kick off after he ends up getting excited and really liking a courtesan. Like, sounds like my story with Nye who twisted our shit that got irritated I went to someone else back at Forbidden Rose. Because thinking about it, I go back to his recap where he mentions being there to be partners, but he's locked out. And this raises a flag because Yukiko said that he said he was an owner of Sinners in front of the whole staff. And I'm like, actually, not thinking about it, how the fuck do you even get the attention / viewers of the whole staff unless you talking about at an opening? And then I remember you did say this was all in game. And if you're at an opening, if you're in a place where every present staff can see this, that's a link shell message or a yell / out because of range more than likely. But that shit don't even sound right. Why would you go in front of the whole staff lineup and lie about owning the venue in link shell? Like, what would he even have to gain from that? Because if it's an opening, you have to be online, or whoever is the owner of centers has to be online, and that's an instant snapback and a kick more than likely. That's just blatantly stupid for no reason. And so I keep reading, and he mentions that he was actually locked outside at the grand opening he went to in order to talk to Yukiko's grand council, and that there was a court with him locked out as well. And so he says he's here on business and flirts with her and lets it be known that he wants to have a session but couldn't in the moment. And so therefore he wants to try to prepay. He says that she didn't take it, and so he left. And so he comes back to hear that he's banned and how he made a court uncomfortable, how he was using his status at a club to get ERP, and how he was trying to manipulate for time. And so things started clicking off inside of my head. First off, the court feeling uncomfortable a bit, because once you take that, you ask, why are they uncomfortable? What could have caused that? You say, oh, flirting is mentioned, wanting to have a session is mentioned, okay, and this is rare, but it does happen that some people don't know, and I even have my own staff talk about this at ME, but there are rare exceptions where a courtesan does not want to take a session, even if they're being paid. They're just too uncomfortable because of that person's personality type. And so, okay, probably got off to a bad foot. Then what do I read next? Said he couldn't at the moment and tried to prepay and got rejected. Okay, courtesan not wanting a session is verified, matches the court being uncomfortable. But then I realized, right? How is he trying to use his status to get ERP or manipulate for time if he offered to pay? And then I remember Rune making a post talking about how he claims how much guild he has. Doesn't make sense for him to be trying to get free ERP, but he's known for bragging about guild supposedly. And this is something even Celia mentioned in their DMs, him revealing her guild for gambling. And then you have to ask, well, how do you blackmail and coerce non-free things? But then I realized one thing missing in his description is the conversation bit about asking if she would take a session. Like, I see a payment mentioned, but not a mention of a discussion about it. And then I cut back to the apology, and he says he got excited and that he was very interested in said court, but then said he went about it the wrong way. So because he got excited and forgot one step to ask if the courtesan would accept the session, which 90% of the time they do, now he's getting hit with blackmail and coercion charges despite offering to pay. That now he's flexing for internet clout over one mistake. And that actually perfectly matches what one of my staff stated was their interaction with him, where he had learned to correct the mistake he had in the past by asking for permission first. And so now we're in this situation where he got bullied over one mistake that he fixed, and now that history is being abused by people like Celia. Even Yoka is saying that if he didn't want this to happen, he shouldn't have a history of it. So once you mess up one time, it's forever lean towards you doing it in the future, and it's okay to not have proof of future situations. You're just forever entitled to being bullied by accusations, and that's okay, it's your fault. So we got Celia Starcrop and shit, and Milk and Kyojin. Rune with the conflict of interest or whatever, giving me every reason in the book to not fact check her ass while breaking her own rules. And now we got Yukiko bullshit and lying on several fronts. And not only that, you didn't even correct his mistake when he said he misspoke. Because this is a delivered message saying he misspoke, and you made no mention of that in the anti-troll Discord, only given the original thing he says. That shows another conflict of interest, because if you wanted to be fair, if you didn't want it to be a rich trial, your ass would have told us about this fucking apology. And now thinking about it, he wouldn't even have to say he misspoke inside of your DMs if it was in front of the whole staff, because he would have been forced to correct that statement by the owner right then. And if saying that he owns centers is said inside a staff link show, that means the conversation regarding the session would have had to have happened in there as well if you're going to say that that comment was used to try to manipulate for time. So I'm supposed to believe he came to an opening and typed in link show that he owned centers, no one checked him / kicked him out for that, and that he was talking in link show asking for a session with these coercion methods. And even if you remove link show and let's say chat instead, you still don't solve the problem of why no one stepped in, including the owner and manager, to correct that statement, and how blackmail and coercion is happening in a public environment in your opening and no one on your staff is taking receipts. Because, you know, normally the way that blackmail works is that you say something false or intimidating, like owning a venue, privately to a person so that you don't lose that power / influence, because saying it publicly in a room full of people that can correct you fucks you over. No matter how I think about it, that comment, when said publicly, should have ended the situation before it even started. Because if you got corrected, you don't even have the ability to blackmail someone with something they know is false. Kyojin's story of it being private outside of the venue actually sounds a lot more realistic. Meanwhile, Mistress Freya is over here, essentially being a parrot on Yukiko's shoulder, just regurgitating anything that happens to anybody else. So at this point, we got 3 people lying and hiding shit and a fucking parrot. But I'm the bad guy. I'm the victim blamer. And it's not the first time I've heard of some drama coming out of Twilight Dreams, because I had other venue owners in my ear saying that Icy Hot Oogles was in some drama back in the day before she opened Twilight. And as a heads up, your group is about to get nuked when Kimura drops her shit in a bit, so I suggest you tighten up and get ready for that. Also, I'm going to have an extended response to Yoka in part 7.03 about this, but just to bring up the immediately relevant screenshot, because I messaged him after I got kicked and we talked for a bit. If you wondered why he didn't defend himself, it's because like 90% of the people banned on this data center that get an accusation but no name, you get charged with inappropriate OLC conduct or harassment, and you got a history of 5+ people that you were in a relationship with. You kinda can't figure out who might have lied or twisted some shit if you're not used to playing detective like I am. You don't get a name, you don't get a screenshot, because everyone wants to talk about consent and automatically believe in the victim, just like you. So every person in the community that gets accused pretty much gets shafted unless that venue owner is like me and Kimura. If you don't have a person that's been lied on in the past to put their foot down, you're probably going to have a venue owner who doesn't want to fight a Discord full of venue owners calling them a victim blamer, and so they'll cave and act on an accusation before they start getting bridges burnt. This community is full of people that care about staff, and they care about victims, but they don't care about people. They don't care about respect. They don't care about fairness. You bring up the right trauma subject, all thoughts of being fair go flying out the window. Immediately emotionally charged, we're protecting the victim status. And it's low-key sad as fuck that it's easy to abuse a bunch of venue owners just using trigger words. Hashtag I love gaslighting role players from before with the troll situation. But that's what happens when you have a toxic culture in the background and a majority venue owner list that's full of trauma and or abusive past. You get a bunch of malicious people getting away with shit. Meanwhile, I'm the one getting crucified for asking for receipts. So since we got 4 instances of malicious negligence or fraud over here, I suggest they take their ass back to those other 6-7 victims and get consent for another recent screenshot, because right now y'all ain't got shit and are probably gonna get torched for abusing the Me Too moment, assuming there's even actual victims to begin with, since Yukiko was lying from back when the accusations first came up. Because this shit has sounded like some shit y'all unnecessarily blew up over an easy ass mistake to fix, proven by the fact that he went months without issues after Rune supposedly tore into him for it. Got torn into, fixed the issue, lied on, and then chain banned and harassed for 3 months with his FC, but according to Yoka, he should have thought about that way back. And any screenshots y'all get for the recent incident, please make sure to make that shit public so I can cross it back with Kyojin in his DMs, so that we can take shit to a live stream verification if it gets that far and the people lying. And it's sad that I'm having to play defense attorney, making sure that people properly submit evidence to a case on a fucking video game. But regardless, this wraps up the section of bans and is the highest intensity of bans that I've seen. However, there is one more that seems to be more disrespectful, albeit less impacting than this one.